Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of The Cheap Seats. This is your weekly Premier League show where we talk all things happening in the Premier League. Today, we had topics, we had everything that was going to happen, and then we found out that Chelsea decided to fire a manager, second manager to be fired. If I told you, AB, Brendan Rodgers would still have a job and would already have a Chelsea manager being fired, would you have believed me?
No chance. No chance whatsoever. I mean, guys, we were fine. Like yesterday, yeah, Chelsea lost, but we used to sing Chelsea lose or like play badly. Like it was the first game of the Champions League, and you're playing in the middle of like Eastern Europe. It's fine.
Croatia.
Yeah.
but anyway, this is your show. We're going to discuss all of that. Remember, we are sponsored by Classic Shirts ZA. That's why AB has a little thing in his corner. And the shirt of the week to kind of commemorate and give people who support this team a little bit of an uplift because, hey, it's tough times there. Is the Chelsea away kit. You can go to Cheap Seats. You go to Classic Shirts ZA. Cheap Seats 99 is the discount code for you, 99 Rand off. You already have the white with the blue tiers. It kind of works just to keep you, to drown your sorrows. Cyrus, what do you think?
It's a nice kit, really nice kit. I think the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is seeing Chelsea win in this kit. But whenever that happens, it will be great. But it looks pretty good from afar. We'll see what happens.
So we've got Kooks on the show. Kooks, what do you think of this kit? What do you? Will it help you drown your sorrows?
I'm a big fan of the kit. I know for a fact Thomas Tuchel doesn't like the kit because that's the last kit he saw Chelsea playing before he lost his job.
Indeed, it is.
Cool. So, big talking point today. Thomas Tuchel was fired. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to start with the Chelsea faithful there at the bottom. Were you surprised? I want to go with Kooks. Were you surprised when you saw that Thomas Tuchel was fired?
Yes and no. Honestly, for me, I thought if we kept Roman Abramovich, if Roman was still the owner, I thought Tuchel would have lost his job at the end of last season after the mess that was last season. So when the news came out today, I think the timing, obviously, with all the money that's being spent, but I do think that he's sacking as harsh as it may come across. But I think I've seen Chelsea managers be fired for less, and I thought that our performances weren't changing. So I was still preparing, maybe trying to prepare the Tuchel out hashtag. By the time I started typing the hashtags, Chelsea got ahead of me.
There was no time. There was no time for the hashtag. It was gone.
It was gone.
So, Cyrus, I was obviously you lost to Zagreb in Eastern Europe, and it was an embarrassing loss to say the least. The season hadn't started well, but it's the end of the window was last week. Thomas Tuchel, Chelsea spent like the most amount of money by any European team in the window. And they got guys who are Tuchel men like Aubameyang and everything else. Why did Chelsea feel the need to fire him now and not give him a chance?
I think, it's one of those things where, and maybe AB as a younger guy who might have not been in a relationship for as long as some of us have, would know what it's like when you have to pull the trigger on a relationship that's not working. Right. So, yes, AB, I know you're in a very loving relationship right now, but, I'm sure it wasn't that long ago when you were like, yeah, okay, Kooks, we'll bring you in here. But AB, I saw you laughing. So but the thing about this is that I think what Todd Bowley and them saw was enough for them to say, look, it's just not getting any better. We've given this guy all the money in the world, and it's not necessarily, made a difference in two specific games, because you had the West Ham game, and then you had the Dinamo game, and West Ham wasn't actually a complete abomination, though it was a really stale performance yet again, which is something we've seen pretty much all season, bar the Spurs game, where the players really lifted their standards and played quite well. But it can't be that, especially when you have all of the resources available to you. Now, some of the stories doing the rounds, and I absolutely hate when all of this stuff comes out after the fact. We're like, well, people didn't know he was cheating on the side, stuff like that. But the fact that the relationship with Bowley and the new ownership group wasn't necessarily great, primarily when they started to really try and use Thomas Tuchel as the de facto sporting director when they were trying to make signings. Now, for somebody like Jose Mourinho, that would have been perfect, would have played directly into his hands. But for somebody like Tuchel, who wants to do stuff on the training pitch, he was like, look, these are the guys, go and get them. I'm not really all that interested. And there seems to be a fractious relationship because of that. Now, I was saying to Wahid on one of our groups that there was a video that I saw fairly recently talking about Tuchel as a manager. And in his time at Dortmund, the Dortmund owners came to understand who he was, and they weren't really big fans of him. Yes, you're also comparing him to one of the Dortmund greats in Klopp. Tuchel was able to perform really well with the team, but his interpersonal skills were the thing that really let him down. And after a few years, they just got sick of that kind of thing. So I wonder how much of that was also a part of what was happening, because he's a very exacting kind of manager and the kind of guy who really expects the most out of his players in training, on the pitch, all of that stuff. And frankly, the best are like that. So in closing, because this is clearly, one of those rants, it seems as if Graham Potter is going to be the new Chelsea manager. Wait. I know you've got to flow to it. There's questions, all of that stuff. But I will say this. The reason I bring it up now is it is very hard to look at the resume of Thomas Tuchel and think that this is a bad coach. The team was just playing poorly. And I think that's one of the key aspects here as to why this happened now, was that he's been given resources. The team hasn't played well since the end of last season. Frankly, we were lucky to get into the Champions League places. Luckily for us, Arsenal just really didn't want to be there. And so you have to look at it and say, okay, fine. It's all well and good to give the man tons of players, even if only one of them is one of the players that he wanted, to be able to say, okay, fine, you're a world-class guy, sort all of this stuff out, when actually what he needed was time for the guys to gel. And I've got other reasons why I think that the team actually struggled to begin the season. But am I surprised it happened? Yes. Am I surprised Chelsea would do this? No. And I think that is the yes and no that Kooks was referring to.
AB, looking out, obviously you are from Fire the Manager FC. When you looked at this Chelsea side, did it give you grounds for Tuchel to be fired so early?
So look, I don't follow Chelsea on a daily basis, right? But they're not doing that badly. They won on the weekend. They've got some very good, objectively good players who Tuchel wanted. What is going to happen now with Aubameyang? Tuchel also sent Rom out. He sent Werner out. If I'm a new manager coming in, I would rather want to work with a Rom or a Werner than a Aubameyang. He sent Alonso out. He's got Kuhle in, which I suppose is
Alonso had to go. Sorry, Alonso had to go. He was like old milk. It was great for your initial cups of coffee, but you don't want to be putting it in your milk now.
Your coffee now. No manager in the world wants to work with Kai Havertz right now. But now Graham Potter is going to work with him. So,
I also have a rebuttal to that. That last night I finally saw a far better, more engaged Kai Havertz than I've seen in a long time playing off the right flank, because he's not a false nine. And that was something that I was livid with week by week. That's why I was also keen to see something different with this team, to see if Aubameyang was going to be it, then so be it. But we can't be persisting with Kai Havertz as the number 9. That was just absolute nonsense.
Yeah, so it's it doesn't surprise me that Chelsea fired another manager, because this is Chelsea, that's what they do. But man, I feel for the next manager, because it's going to be tough. He doesn't have a window. He's got all this spin that's happened. But I didn't think things were that bad. I thought United pre the Liverpool game were worse than where Chelsea are right now. And
look, Kooks, there's a theory here where it's one of the situations where, as Cyrus says, when you know, when it looks bad, it looks bad. What areas in Chelsea were looking that bad and that glaring to get Thomas Tuchel fired when they even spent 250 million for him?
What areas? Cheapers. Probably besides goalkeeper, I thought defensively we needed to add players. I mean, we spent over 200 million on defenders, and we paid 75 million for our fourth choice centre back that we wanted in the summer, which still mind boggles me, the money we paid for Fana, for someone who we didn't want at the start of the window, and now all of a sudden we outpaid him more than what we paid for Jules Kouande. We couldn't score goals. I think that's something that I think what I found now in this league, that when you play three at the back, eventually you get found out. I mean, we're lacking creativity. Our front three, besides Sterling, couldn't find a goal. Mount has got no assists, no goals. Same with Havertz, and was just hard to watch. Like you watch certain games and you're just going like, guys, like, I don't know how we're going to score a goal here. And I look at the season, we've not played well in any game. There's been no game where I felt like, except for the first game. I mean, even that was like, I just never felt like it. I'll say from about November last year, we've been in a slump. I mean, we were top of the log at a stage, and then we found ourselves basically trying to get out of the top four. And we got a striker for 90 million who our manager could not get to work. And unfortunately, like, if you pay 90 million, the manager's always going to be the guy to leave. I understand that his players need to take accountability, and that is fair. Like, we haven't been playing well, and I just don't think we've adapted. I mean, like, for example, like, I know that we beat Pep 3 times in his first year, Thomas Tuchel, but they never adapted again. We tried to do the exact same thing the whole of last year, and we couldn't beat Man City, and then this year looked like more the same. So the players playing out of position. It's just it got to a point where it was just like, I don't know what we're doing. Like, I was looking at Chelsea, and I'm like, even start the season, I was like, I've got Chelsea stress in June. Like, why am I stressing about Chelsea in June? Like, we've just gone through one season. I was like, well, I don't understand what we're doing. Like, it was probably one of the worst windows we've been involved in. And I'm like, I don't know if we bring, like, yes, we've got Kuhle, and like the guys who signed besides Sterling, I'm like, why do we have these guys on the team? Like, I don't know. Like, we've got Zakaria on the bench who I've even found him on FIFA. Never mind, now all of a sudden he's on loan in our team. Like, I'm like, who are these people in our club? Like,
Kooks, here's a question for you: Zakaria or Saul?
Because at least Saul, I knew. Like, at least Saul, I knew. Right? Yeah, he was on this earth. I knew he breathed oxygen. I knew he walked. He had 2 legs. I knew he was doing things.
Like, sometimes it's the ones you don't know that could turn out to be okay, you know?
I know why Tuchel got fired. He picked up the phone, he phoned Erik ten Hag, and he said, Harry Maguire. Someone at Chelsea found out, and they were like, listen, Tuchel
I don't know if Tuchel was even involved in any of the signings outside of Aubameyang.
Cyrus, how much blame should you put on the players? Because this team 18 months ago won the Champions League.
Yeah.
What's changed now?
So let's look at how they won the Champions League. And this is also the other thing. Tuchel showed that he was very much a master of cup competitions. When it came to it, we made it to the final in the League Cup, the FA Cup, the Champions League. We won the cup competitions. But over the course of the season, the players were all over the place in certain games. Sometimes they'd be fantastic in the big games and really shit in the small games. Sorry, excuse my language. And then other times you also have the guys playing really, really well in the league games and then just weren't able to put their form together. And I think Kooks really raised a very interesting point here. And this is where you start to put the CSI puzzle together, right? Just imagine this. Why do you start the season with Ruben Loftus-Cheek as a right wing back? And then moving Reece James, who's been one of the best right wing backs in the world, to right centre back, negating any attack that you have down that flank, which has been one of the things. So he's tried to chop and change things, and in that you didn't see any method to the madness. The Dinamo game actually proved all of those things at once, where it was like, okay, so you need a goal, so you chucked pretty much everybody and their brother on, but you were still doing the same thing of trying to get to the flanks and get across, and Dinamo were happy to absorb that kind of pressure. So what you saw was a Tuchel who seemed to be bereft of ideas, even after having spent all of this money. And so you asked Kooks where the problem areas were. The problem was always in midfield, and they never addressed one of the biggest issues for me, which is Jorginho. Jorginho needed to leave. He doesn't do what Chelsea need him to do. And often if you see him come off the bench, you're not thinking, oh, thank God they put Jorginho on. You're like, okay, I guess maybe Jorginho might be on penalty duties, and he's been missing a few of those. So when we're in a situation where your team needs to score a goal and you're looking around thinking, so who will it be? And the youngster Amanda Broya comes in, you start thinking, maybe, but I have my doubts. And this is where I think Chelsea are at the moment, in the sense that as a team in the top 6 in England, I don't think any one of them fears Chelsea. They don't look at a Chelsea game and think, "Oh, we'll never win this," or "How are we going to get past the back four or back five?" or "These guys are going to score against us." So there was never ever any area in that team where you think, "Okay, fine, Chelsea's attackers are really fantastic," or "Chelsea's midfielders are just otherworldly," or "Chelsea's defense impenetrable." None of those areas were ever really looked at. And if I'm being totally honest, the worst thing to happen to Thomas Tuchel was N'Golo Kante starting to show his age, because any of the cracks that appeared, they were papered over by Kante being just incredible. Now he's gone.
Okay, this is emergency podcast, so we've got Wahid coming in to give us his views.
It's Wahid.
Yes, Wahid, what do you think of?
He's also got a bit of a weird grin on his face. I'm very worried here. I'm very worried.
Look, Manchester United is flying high this week. Flying high.
What happened? What happened? We went from getting stonked around 4-0 by Brighton, 4-0 by Brentford and 2-1 by Brighton to beating the 5-game invincible champions of 5-game Premier League.
Look, if that Martinelli goal went in,
the self-anointed champions of the world after 5 games.
Okay, Wahid, let's leave it at that. Thomas Tuchel's been fired. It's a Chelsea day. It was a blessing in my life to figure out that we weren't going to talk about Arsenal. What do you think? Why do you think they fired him?
Yeah, well, I said on last week's podcast that if we looked at Tuchel's form over the last, I think it was 14 games, it was worse than even Ole's record over his last 14 games. And we know how shambolic the last 14 games of Ole's reign was. I saw another stat today to show that the last, I think 10 or 15 games of the Tuchel era have been just as bad as the end of the Frank Lampard era. So it just goes to show just how shambolic it's been at Chelsea. And I remember sending a message to our WhatsApp group on the weekend when I was watching Chelsea play against West Ham, and I said that Chelsea may go on to win this, which they did unfairly, but I said they may go on to win this, but it shouldn't detract from the fact that this is an absolute shambles. I was watching them and they lacked shape in every single department. They lacked a defensive shape, they lacked an attacking cohesion, and it seemed to be a team that it seemed to be a manager who'd lost his dressing room, and it seemed to be a team with no direction. And I think that when that happens, there's only one route, and that's for the manager to leave. And we've seen that before, and everybody knows that I was the biggest Ole fanboy in the world. But there comes a time when no matter how much you love the manager and no matter how much you love the man in charge, for the better of the club, they need to be moved on. And it seems like a weird thing to do after spending the sheer volume of money that Chelsea spent to back Tuchel, to buy players for him, like Aubameyang. They've literally bought a player for him and then fired him less than a week later. So it does seem strange from an off the field perspective to back him to that extent and then get rid of him. But from an on the pitch perspective, I saw no way forward for Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea.
Yeah, look, Kooks, let's start with what happens now. Obviously, Todd Bowley's going to look for a manager whom he wants. He was he was a new owner. So I thought Thomas Tuchel would last 6 months and then he'd be fired and then Todd Bowley would get someone else. But now we're here. We're at this point. Who do you want to be the next Chelsea coach?
For the next 18 months, because
exactly. That's how we roll. That's how I believe Chelsea should give out 18-month contracts all the time. I mean,
they really should.
It's literally something I've gotten used to. Like I've had Chelsea fans at the uproar. Like, I can't believe we lost another manager. I'm like, are you really that shocked? Like, is this the first time you support this club? Chelsea managers are like Game of Thrones. Chelsea managers are like Game of Thrones characters. Don't get attached to anyone because they're about to go anytime soon.
Yeah,
but for me,
nice people.
Oh yeah, geez, especially in the Champions League, you're leaving in 6 months. If for me, I think out of the candidates that are open, I've always been a Poch fan. So I mean, the job he did at Spurs, especially with that young side, and when he did, I think Poch is the right guy. Having been in the Premier League and having, I know the PSG job didn't work out for him, but I mean, when the club is run by a 22-year-old, I mean, what can you expect? But I know a lot of people want Graham Potter. I just don't think you go from Brighton to Chelsea. That's my thing. Like, there can't be a development where I know he's building something, but okay, cool. It's nice seeing Brighton play good football, but they came 10th last season. That's great. I mean, we won the Champions League 18 months ago. I don't want someone to just taking us out to 10th. I feel like he's doing a good job at Brighton. I still think that Chelsea is a big enough club to attract some of the big names, whether it's Potter, when Zinedine Zidane being linked to Bielsa. I just don't want Chelsea. I don't want to see the Graham Potter project happening at Chelsea where we're trying to build his career. I just don't think he's ready. I don't think he's good enough yet to coach Chelsea. I think he probably will. I hope to be proven wrong, but I mean, I've seen Chelsea get the Andres Villas-Boas and Frank Lampard and guys, these wonder kids. The only wonder kid we ever won was Jose Mourinho, but he came for Champions League. And now I'm coming off a guy who took Brighton to 10th last year. Like, I'm sorry if that doesn't fill me up with too much hope.
So, Kooks, I have a question there. So basically, the Premier League isn't what it used to be in terms of that natural progression from a Brighton to maybe a Spurs to a Chelsea, because at the moment that gap between Brighton and Chelsea isn't as big as it was in 2005. And what happens is if managers take that step to stay an intermediate club after Brighton, they often get stuck there because the club won't let them go. And we come to accept that the Premier League is now the European Super League. We've seen the Premier League spend as much money as all the other European leagues combined. So unless Graham Potter were to try his hand outside of England, the only natural progression for him would be to a top club. If he were to try an intermediate club, it would be very difficult for him to leave that intermediate club until his contract was up. So Chelsea then are stuck in a catch-22 situation to say, do we go for the project manager? Man United have gone for project manager. Arsenal have a project manager. At some point in the past, whether Jurgen Klopp was probably a project manager when he came to Liverpool. He's no longer a project manager. Do you choose a project manager, or do you choose the next a star from the European merry-go-round of managers, and just accept that you're on that merry-go-round and that this isn't going to last long? It's going to be fun. It's going to be 18 to 24 months, and then you're going to jump on. Someone else is going to jump into that job from that merry-go-round.
I think for me, it's look at Teta and when Klopp took over Liverpool. I don't think in terms of squad-wise we're as bad as those teams were. I mean, we're coming third in the Premier League last year. We made top 4 the last 3 years, and we won the Champions League a couple of years ago. So I still think we've got a very good squad. I think we've got very good players. Last year I felt like we were in a position to compete for the title if we were able to get Lukaku to perform. We're top of the table in November, and then we sort of fell apart. So I still feel like we're in a position where we don't have to down tools and be like, okay, guys, the next 3 years we're going to build, we're going to settle down, and even our squad may be young, but I still think we've got good enough players to compete. But I feel like we had a bad window that set us back quite a bit. I mean, but I still think we go for the big European manager, someone like Poch, someone who go there, listen, like, you come in, try and fix things now, and try and compete immediately still.
Yeah,
I have
Kooks,
points to make.
Kooks, I know you have to go now, so thank you very much for joining us on the pod. Hopefully you can join a little bit more. But yeah, thanks for your contribution.
Sorry, yeah.
Thanks, Kooks.
I'd love to see you guys soon, and I'd love to come back soon.
Cool.
Yeah, well, Chelsea will fire someone soon, so
Stop
Yeah,
it.
but he doesn't have to just be there for the firing.
Cyrus.
He can be there for the hirings.
Cyrus, there's Project 2030 at Chelsea, where that's why Chukwuemeka was bought. So a lot of the youngsters were bought now.
Even Fofana.
So do you go Graham Potter? Are you of that ilk, or do you want to go and get like a Zidane, a guy who's won things?
So, and I want neither of them. But the reason that I say this is Zinedine Zidane managed an unbelievable Real Madrid team. Right?
The same reservations I had when he was linked with Man United.
It's like, okay, so he went into a place where like all he had to do was just say, I'm Zidane. And then the guys will be like, oh my God, it's Zidane. And then they just start playing. I think, and this is also the other thing about Graham Potter. When Graham Potter walks
if Zidane looks at Luke Shaw, it says, I'm Zidane. Luke Shaw will look at him confused and be like, who?
I'm a millennial.
That's also because like Luke Shaw is disabled. So
no, let's not go there. We're not going to be making any jokes about disabled folks. But I will say this about Graham Potter, not that he's disabled, but when you're a manager, and this goes to Wahid's point, when you're a manager like Graham Potter and you're wanting to try and make it to your next big club, you don't necessarily start at somewhere like Chelsea, because Chelsea is flush with internationals, players who've won a heck of a lot, and that's where the levels of respect and disrespect come in. Because look at what's happened at United over the years when they've brought in guys like, not that Ralph Rangnick is, okay. I mean, he's become a bit of a joke now, but in essence, you have these players saying, well, what the heck have you done? And how does Graham Potter respond to Thiago Silva, respond to any of the Chelsea players who won the Champions League last season, or people like Azpilicueta, who they're consummate professionals, but he's done everything that there is, at the top level. So managing players at that level is something Graham Potter has not had to do yet, and that's my biggest reservation. It's one thing to say, okay, fine, you might be building for the future and you all grow together, but I don't think many of these players, like somebody like Koulibaly, Thiago Silva, these guys want to win. They want to win now. Even Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, they want to win now. That's why they're there. They're in their late 30s. The time for winning is now. Somebody like a Mount, maybe you can give him some time and they'll be like, yes, okay. But they've also won the Champions League, so they want more than just we're building for the future. How do you then control that environment? And that's why I think it needs to be somebody like Pochettino who can say, yes, I haven't won anything in England. I won stuff in France. We know that if you're managing PSG, you will. But I also created good teams that went to the Champions League final. Graham Potter hasn't even been to the FA Cup final, let alone the League Cup final.
So you're telling, for half your answer, it felt like you're going goose hitting. But
is he available? Is he available?
I don't know if he's. Have they let him out of the old age home? I'm not sure where.
Well, you're about to get him out. Well, look, this is the club that got us Avram Grant, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be too surprised.
Luis Philippe Scolari. Look, Avram Grant is one of the worst things that ever happened to football management in England and at Chelsea. I'll never forget the one Champions League game where Chelsea scored. We were trying to keep a lead, and he was just there on the sidelines doing this, and I'm like, that is not leadership, Avram. That is not leadership.
So you are saying Pochettino, don't let Dean tell you this. Wahid, is AB, is Poch the guy for Chelsea? Is he the right caliber?
Guys, Poch is like, yes, he got to the Champions League final with Spurs. Whoop-de-doo. Did he win it? No. Okay. He couldn't win every single trophy on offer in PSG. Couldn't even make a challenge in the Champions League there. He's a good coach. He did a good job at Spurs. But what's he going to do with this Chelsea team? A team that doesn't identify with the way he wants to play. He's going to need to come in there. He's going to need to speak Spanish to them, hug them a bit, and then hopefully pray that Aubameyang is going to play the way he wants to play. I think you need a big personality, a guy who's done it like Zidane, who's going to go in there and be like, I'm here to stay. I'm going to win the Champions League. You're either on the bus or you're not. Because look, the Premier League's done, right? Spurs are Arsenal are challenging for top four. Apparently, there's rumors that United want to challenge for the top four now. So, the top four races is going to be hard. So, yeah, rumors. We'll see. But I think you need to focus on the cup competitions and just do that. That's what happens when someone gets fired.
Chelsea have to make top four. And the reason I say this is I keep thinking about Leeds. I keep thinking about when Leeds were in the Champions League and they went absolutely balls to the wall, spent money galore, didn't make the Champions League places, and it literally killed that club. And Chelsea, they've borrowed a hell of a lot of money to get into the position that they're in now. So that, for me, is also one of the reasons why Todd Boehly and them made the decision. But they also don't have the knowledge on how to pick a next manager. And I think this is where they're really in a tough situation, because this could go absolutely tits up if they don't manage it correctly.
John Terry.
Look, I'll say one thing. Let's say they bring in Potter, right? They have to bring in somebody in the backroom staff that the players completely connect with. If it's JT, that's fine. But they need to have some sort of Chelsea links that really the players can respect. They really bring in a lot of that sort of camaraderie and get the guys on board. Because if it's just Potter and his boys from Brighton, everyone's going to be like, that first training session, will be like what people said about Ranić's training sessions. It was too simple. The players were just like, what the hell is this guy doing? They didn't know what was happening. So I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Maybe Potter's gonna like show Koulibaly and I don't know Thiago Silva pictures or videos of Lewis Dunk and how they spin.
And who else? Ben White. And who else?
Yes.
I don't know who.
Look, but Wahid, let's go to you for this one.
That's a jab at Moyes, because Moyes showed Rio Ferdinand and Vidic videos of Phil Jagielka and said, "This is how you defend." And I was like, "You're showing a Rolls Royce how to drive like a Toyota Conquest."
Yes, but Toyotas don't break down.
You need a good driver in that car, because the Chelsea car isn't bad, right? It's not not a bad car.
I agree.
You need a Lewis Hamilton there.
Pochettino, I just like to say that the idea of him failing at PSG is one of the biggest myths in football, and the stick that people use to beat him with PSG is so misguided. PSG is an anomaly of a football club, and you shouldn't judge a manager based on PSG. But it's like judging I don't know. It's like a circus there, and you can't judge the conductor of that circus based on the circus around him. So, be that as it may, my opinion is you can't continuously beat Mauricio Pochettino with that PSG stick. Yeah. It's well documented that he was my first choice to take over at Old Trafford. I back Erik ten Hag. It looks like he's got his shit in order, and it looks like he's doing it looks like he knows where he wants to go. But I wanted Pochettino in the hot seat at Man United. I think that he'd shown enough at Spurs to show that he has it in him to take that step up to a big club.
Yeah.
If I were in the Chelsea hot seat right now, that would be my first and only phone call to say, Mauricio, do you want the job? I think that he's good enough to get that team playing to the way he wants. I think that team has enough players of good caliber to play the way Mauricio Pochettino wants. Mm-hmm. I don't think that team is starved of quality. I think that team is starved of direction. And I think that Pochettino would be the one to get that direction back in the team back and do it quickly. Having said that, I wouldn't, if I were a sporting director, which the owner is at the moment, he's the owner / sporting director / potential next coach. I would understand. I would understand going the Potter route and choosing the project manager, simply because other teams have found some form of success going that project route. The reservations are that they've thrown a hell of a lot of money at this transfer window, and if they don't make top 4, that could be big trouble. Having said that, that's exactly the same for Man United. Man United had a budget of 120 million pounds and absolutely blew that budget backing the manager. Where's that money coming from in our club? You wonder. There's been talks of getting private equity firms into Old Trafford, but that is Man United's not the discussion.
You're borrowing it, right?
But you fear for Chelsea and Man United the same way, to say that you've thrown a hell of a lot of money at this, and what's going to happen if you don't make the top 4? And remember, 6 doesn't go into 4 all that well. So, from a long-term perspective, I would understand going the Potter route. But from a right now, what's just happened in the transfer window, who can get the best out of the side right now? Mauricio Pochettino, my choice, no questions.
But like Chelsea aren't a long-term club, though. That's the thing. Like we joke about it, but this guy is going to get 100 games.
No, but you know what though? I don't think that that's necessarily the case. If, let's say, for instance, and this is also, I hate living in the realm of if onlys, right? But where Chelsea are right now is also because of the fact that they've started really poorly. The form's been absolutely horrid. But there's reason behind that too. We lost 2 of our most critical centre backs playing for the club. You're having to build up from defense from scratch. That's going to hurt any team. It doesn't matter who you are. It's going to hurt your team. And then there have also been results that have just gone completely in the wrong direction. If Spurs don't equalize against Chelsea in that second game of the season and Chelsea beats Spurs, we're not talking about Tuchel losing his job. We're talking about the fact that, yes, they beat Spurs, and so there is light at the end of the tunnel. The thing about all of this is we're living in the world that we live in now, which is Chelsea have a real need to try and make one of 2 decisions. If it's project managing, then they've really invested heavily in trying to win in the future as opposed to right now? Or is it saying we've spent really heavily and we need to perform by getting into the top 4 minimum and then potentially winning a cup? I think that's where they're really sitting with this thing.
Look, and I think for me, Poch is a great manager. Chelsea's an anomaly of a club like PSG, as Wahid says, and that's the only worry. If I was Poch, would be I'm stepping into the same set of circumstances. Yes, the players may not be superstars or may not run the club, but the club owners are trigger happy, especially a new owner coming in. But my thing has always been Todd Boehly was allowed one managerial change because he comes into a club with a new manager. He probably had his ideas of who he wanted to manage the club. He gave Tuchel a chance. He realized it's not going to work, so he's going to get his guy in. And he's allowed that as a new owner. Any new owner comes in. For instance, if the Glazers leave Manchester United, the first person I know who probably would get fired if a new manager came in, I'd put my money on his Eric Ten Hag, just because you might come in and say, actually, I prefer Zidane better.
Claudio Ranieri.
Sad,
you know.
funny.
So I'd just like to switch the rhetoric here, because you're talking about the way you're talking. Switch the rhetoric. If you were Graham Potter, young manager, upwardly mobile,
I'd take it.
Yeah,
I would take it.
There's no Graham Potter in the world who's going to be like Chelsea. Never. You know.
Think about it, Wahid. You're coaching. You're going to be coaching in the Champions League next week, not like next year.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah.
You've got players who are like Danny Welbeck's great. Aubameyang's not as great
Danny
as
Welbeck's not great.
But also,
okay.
He's better.
Graham Potter, you're going to say, cool, I make top 6 this year with this team. I challenge for a cup, get to semis, whatever. But you give me money in my first full summer transfer window and I'm going to bring you a trophy. That's what I'm...
But that's the problem with what Chelsea have done now, is that now you're guaranteeing that you have to spend next year. And I don't know if Todd Boehly's thought about
I don't think it's got the appetite. I don't think it's got the appetite. What happens with Lukaku? He's on loan. I don't think Inter are going to suddenly stump up whatever Chelsea are looking for from a cash perspective. So there's also the weird possibility that Lukaku comes back to Chelsea next season under whatever the new coach is, and maybe his issue was with Thomas Tuchel, and then he's like, right, I'm going to give it my all. So let's see. But to your point though, Mpo, you have to look at this and say, yes, Graham Potter is definitely going to take this job. It's a no-brainer, really. It's just a question of what does he expect he's going to do. And frankly, if he's able to, and I think he's the front runner. I see news reports about Chelsea asking Brighton for permission to talk to him. If he can make Chelsea a far better attacking side and give them real cutting edge, he will be at Chelsea for years and years to come, because what Boehly wants more than anything is like the Showtime Lakers. Give us a show. At the end of the day, if you are able to sell this team, give us a show, make them entertaining, then it doesn't really matter as much. You'll be like, right, then we'll be in all or nothing. So we'll be like all or nothing Chelsea for 7 years. You know, it'll be like as long as they were entertaining.
Oh, Neil Maupay in a Chelsea number 9 jersey, man.
No, but okay. In the spirit of the Showtime Lakers, I hope whoever comes in is the Pat Riley that ignites them all, and Mason Mount is the Magic Johnson that kind of brings it all together. But thank you very much, guys. It's the end of our show. It's a Chelsea show. We're supposed to talk about VAR, but we all know that we don't like VAR. But because Thomas Tuchel got fired, we had to do that. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. And remember, our shirt of the week for Cyrus, just in case he forgets. Shirt of the week, discount code CheapSeats99 to wipe your sorrows if you're a Chelsea fan. Better look. You'd rather look good than
be for the amount of managers they're going to have this season.
Exactly. But outside of that, thank you very much. Goodbye, good night, and le sale, cacaficio.